Our guest speaker is live. He's international, and he is from Sweden, Mr. Jonas Martenson. And again, Jonas was an exchange student. It's actually 40 years ago this month that I met Jonas when he stayed with Jane and Frank Riley. And Jonas attended Tupelo High School for his senior year with me and with Merritt and Rusty and some other friends who are on the call. Professionally, as I said, Jonas lives in Sweden. He is the founder and director of Reese Capital, which is listed on the NASDAQ in Copenhagen. He's been in the global financial sector for over 30 years with Merrill Lynch, Bear Stearns, and Schroders in London. Jonas travels extensively to the United States for business, and he's actually been to Mississippi many times, high school reunions, and kept in touch with a lot of his friends that he met during that wonderful year. He's married. He and his wife, Cecilia, have 3 children. So join me, please, as we go back to the 1980s and bring our special friend back, Mr. Jonas Martenson. And Jonas, I'll turn the floor over to you, and I'll mute myself. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you everyone for joining the call. It's great, really, to after almost 40 years later, being able to speak to everyone. I mean, it's also wonderful for me to know that on the call I have some of my close friends here, Rusty Roden from Louisiana, Merritt Lee Bank Herring from Tupelo, and my host mother Jane Riley, and my host father Jim High. And I hope I did not forget anyone that I did not know maybe is on the call. So thank you so much everyone for joining. My name is Jonas Martenson. I live in Stockholm, Sweden since about 15 years now. And I spent a wonderful year in Tupelo in 1980 to 1981 and graduated with distinction, I have to say, from Tupelo High School, so class of 81. I think Rotary Youth Exchange program is a fantastic program. It meant a lot for me as an individual, and it meant a lot for the families where I stayed. I had 7 or 8 families during my year in Tupelo. Most of the families were members of the Tupelo Rotary Club, but not all of them, which meant that I had the ability to share different experiences, different families, different habits, but still attending the same high school, Tupelo High, which to me was a place where I met a lot of new friends. Many of my friends had been to visit me and my family here in Stockholm, Sweden, our holiday house in southern Sweden, and I have been back to Tupelo many times. Most recently, probably 3 years, maybe 4 years ago. And I usually stay with Jane Riley, my host mother, and it's always great to be back. It feels like time stands still. I have been working quite abroad. After I left Tupelo, I went back to finish the Swedish high school and then went on to do university in Gothenburg, Sweden. And after that, I started working internationally in Switzerland, and then a few years in Belgium, and then a number of years in London working for various banks there, including Merrill Lynch, and gave me a lot of experience, but I always felt it would be very interesting to do something on my own. And I was able to, when moving back to Stockholm, set up my own fund management company, Rest Capital. We are now 6 people in the company, and we are investing in alternative assets, insurance-linked securities. Do quite a lot of business with our US brokers. We have an international investor base, and quite often attend conferences in New York and Washington, D.C. But obviously nothing this year. All trips are canceled. Every conference we attend is now digital. So a very new environment for someone in my type of work where I actually want to meet people and present what we do and what our company does. So it's obviously a bit challenging for lots of businesses, not least restaurants, hotels, anyone in the hospitality industry. But we're doing fine. We have a stable business, and so we're not complaining. I know there are a lot of other businesses who are suffering a lot more than we do. back to the year in Tupelo, it meant a lot for me. I was 17 when I came to Tupelo. It's an age where you are not fully grown up, but you're not also a kid. I came across a new culture. The South to me was quite different from Europe, but also very exciting and lots of friendly people. And sometimes when I tell some of my friends in New York that I've stayed and lived 1 year in Mississippi, they say, where did you stay? And I tell everyone that it's a wonderful place, lots of friendly people, and you should go there yourself to visit because it's well worth the trip. During my year in Tupelo, I was also able to visit a lot around the various parts of the United States. My host families were very generous and took me on various trips. Together with the Tupelo High School Chorus, we went to Washington, D.C. by bus. Had a wonderful week in Washington, and I also visited various parts of Mississippi, New Orleans, and other parts of the States. It's been a wonderful way to keep in touch with people, and I really encourage all Rotary clubs to join the exchange program. Little bit about maybe, I mean, something we all kind of are part of, COVID-19, general economy. This is of course a global pandemic, and no country, no state is alone in this. A lot of people have commented on Sweden's approach, and we get a lot of questions about whether we have an approach where we have no restrictions in place, and I get a lot of questions when I speak to various people about this. The thing that is different in Sweden is that we did not have a general lockdown. We have actually relied on the National Public Health Authority's general advice, and the advice is to stay at home and work from home as much as possible. Keep 2 meters distance, but also the Public Health Authority decided to keep schools open up until age 15. But our youngest son, who is age 17, his high school became digital. So the approach was to find a balance between kind of shutting everything down and perhaps thinking about the children and how they are affected by schools shutting down. We have been unsuccessful in our elderly care homes. We've had high mortality rates in many care homes, which is quite tragic. But I think the decision to keep the schools open was a good decision. I think it's very important for children to be able to go to school, get a proper meal, and meet their friends. So I think the negative consequences of shutting down schools are quite significant actually. I think it's very much a situation where we are all in this together, and there are we don't really know what is the best approach. I am under no circumstances claiming that our approach is the best. I just think that every country, every state has to do whatever it can to limit the spread of COVID-19. And also in Sweden, there was a big debate about our hospitals being able to cope. And fortunately, they were able to cope. We've been able to flatten the curve, as everyone now speaks about in the whole world. And I think that was really the key to it. We are now probably at the latest stage compared to the US, where the curve has been tumbling in recent months. Our hospitals' intensive care units are now not at all stretched. We are looking at people coming back to school in late August. Universities will not be allowed to reopen completely. They will reopen, but they will have larger gatherings will be digital, but smaller seminars, less than 50 people, will occur as planned. So I think the approach has been to be balanced, to to try to find a balance between shutting everything down and not having you know, thousands of people at a concert or theater. So we're currently in Sweden where theaters are closed, all concerts are of course not allowed, and the maximum public gathering is 50 people. And some of the other European countries who did do a lockdown have been more successful in the number of mortalities. But I think it's also remains to be seen how this will be in the long term. So I don't want to, you know, make any assumptions about the future. I just think that somehow we will be in this situation for some time to come. This meeting, of course, is now digital. I think a lot of meetings in the future, unfortunately, will become digital, but we will have to try to meet, you know, with family and friends, closer people. So we have been enjoying the Swedish summer, and we've met my parents who are 85 and 90 outdoors. We do all lunches, coffees, meetings outdoors. The general belief from our public health authorities that meeting people outdoors is much safer, but once you're inside, it becomes a bit more tricky. The whole situation is less good for spreading COVID-19 virus. Yeah, I think that was a little bit from me. I think be happy to open up the floor to any questions. I think as a final note, Rotary Youth Exchange Program meant a lot to me as an individual. We also had a girl from Memphis staying with my family, and the fact that most of my friends have been visiting us, myself and my family, has really been great. So thanks again, David, for allowing me to speak. It's been wonderful to reconnect, even though it's digital. And I look forward to being able to meet in person in the not too distant future. So thank you so much.
I'll start off the questions, and everybody who has a question, you can unmute yourself and ask. But Jonas, talk for a second. You talked about your year in Tupelo. How do you think your life was impacted? What do you think your life would have been like? I know you traveled before you came here, obviously, but what do you think your life would have been like if you hadn't had that experience versus what it ended up being? How did it alter the course of your life a little bit?
It's a good question, David. I think it actually, I grew a lot as a person. I attended various churches, different faiths. I learned a lot about the new culture, and staying in a place for almost a year and attending school, meeting people day to day is a rather unique experience. So it meant a lot for me as a person, and it gave me, I would say, a more tolerant attitude perhaps to new people, to new cultures, having seen that things can be done differently. I guess we are part of the same cultural hemisphere in that sense. I mean, so having gone to China or Indonesia would have been a little bit different, but still, you know, Sweden to Mississippi was enough difference to make it very interesting, a lot of fun, a lot of you know, cultural hiccups, questions, not understanding perhaps how things are done, but and learning a lot. So I think for me as an individual, it meant a lot. Happy to have any more questions. I know I have some of my other high school friends here on the call, so.
This is Ernie Joyner. Jonas, would you speak some about your business?
Yes, happy to do so. Our company is what we call an alternative investment fund manager, and we invest in insurance-linked securities, and some of our brokers are based in the States. We use Wilmington Trust as a custodian bank. And in this industry, a lot of the conferences are either in London or in New York. So I tend to be able to visit the US on a regular basis. And we started and launched the fund approximately 10 years ago. And the first 3 years were pretty tough. We were too small. Assets under management was rather limited. Then gradually we built the business, and we created a track record for the fund. And last year we actually won Best Niche Hedge Fund. We won the Best Nordic Hedge Fund, and we got the Investors' Choice Award. So we're really pleased about these awards. Then they create like credibility for our fund and for our company, which, you know, after having a bit of a struggle in the early years is really something that feels great.
Can you tell us what an insurance-linked security is?
Yes, we mainly invest in anything which is linked to insurance. It could be what we call cat bonds, catastrophe bonds, and life insurance policies. So it's a variety of instruments which are linked to insurance somehow. And the returns we provide are in US dollars, and our aim is to provide absolute returns. So we're not perhaps a hedge fund, but more what we call an alternative investment fund.
Thank you.
I can see the sun is coming. I'm just going to move over here to make it a bit easier.
This is Jeffrey Mitchell. Can you talk about your experience with the healthcare industry in your country?
Yes, we have a system which is similar to Canada and all other European countries, in that we have a public health system. So when you attend a hospital, there is no charge. When you go to see your GP or general practitioner or your local doctor, you have to pay a one-off fee of approximately, I'm just translating to US dollars, approximately maybe $15, $20. Prescription drugs are not free, but they are subsidized. So, and if you are taking a drug on a regular basis, you reach a certain limit, and after that you will not pay for the drug. Pretty much it's cost free. Our system is very similar, like all other European countries. It's a public health system. I think the advantage with that is that we get actually, and you know, public authorities sometimes are not very efficient, and I would agree with that. But I think on the whole of it, we have a mixture of allowing certain private companies to operate in the system. So you have, if I go to see my local practitioner, it may be a privately held company quoted on the stock exchange, but they have a contract with local health authority to supply their services. So it's a mixture of public hospitals, smaller private clinics, but at the end of the day, the bill is paid by the state. So far, it's actually worked quite well. I think that the experience all over Europe is that people are pretty much in support of having this national health service. You know, UK have their own national health service, NHS, and I used to live in London for 10 years. So I know that the support there is very strong for a universal health care. So I think the European experience is pretty positive, and I think the sad thing, if I make one political comment during this call, is that in the US it tends to become a bit politicized, and I think healthcare maybe is not so political as one would envisage. So I think the system works well in Europe. Thank you.
And Jonas, we have a text question. Just to put that in context, you have a sibling who's a doctor, correct?
Yes, my sister is a doctor. She's a heart doctor. I don't know the word in English for, but, and then her husband, of course, is infectious diseases. So of course he got COVID-19 and he is now well recuperated, got it from one of his patients. And I think in Sweden, we've seen the virus spread more in the big cities like Stockholm and Gothenburg, less in some of the countryside. So it's a lot of variety even in Sweden and most European countries, same as in the States, where you have some cities have a more difficult environment. People live closer to each other. You commute on the underground or the subway. So I think that's same in most European cities, where it tends to be a city problem, and in Sweden very much so. I mean, we were not allowed to travel in Sweden. We were not allowed to go down to our holiday house. Once again, not by legislation, but the public health authority said, we strongly do not recommend anyone traveling more than 2 hours away from their own home. So obviously we knew that if we went down to our holiday house, people would look at us and not be very happy. So pretty much everyone stayed put.
We had a question text in. What do you think the long-term implications of COVID are going to be for the economy and the world? If you could answer that real quick.
I think it will affect trade. I think it will affect the services sector as well. I can only see it from our own little small perspective, where I can, I mean, normally I would have been attending a conference every year in New York or Washington, D.C. So it's going to be more difficult for a lot of businesses to meet new clients. Obviously, the ones you've already met, you can call them, you can Zoom them, you can do whatever. But it's more tricky, I think, for businesses to create new businesses. So I think it, unfortunately, will be maybe a little bit slower growth. I think that we will probably see a lot of people being able to do quite well anyway. I don't think all companies will suffer, but I think the hospitality industry will suffer.
Hey, Jonas.
Hey, Jane, how are you?
I'm good. And you?
Very well. Great you're on the call. My host mother, Jane. Wonderful.
I'm so glad that the Rotary Club asked me to join with them today.
So am I. It's great you're on the call, and it's wonderful to be speaking and seeing each other. I hope to be back to Tupelo soon.
I hope you do too. I would love to have you. Please tell your family and your mom and dad particularly hello for me.
Thank you so much, Jane. I sure will. I saw my parents a few days ago, so I will tell them.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. This is Lachelle Vaughn calling in. I'm from the Memphis chapter, by way Tupelo of Aberdeen, Mississippi. So hello to everybody from down home. My question for our guest speaker is, if you had it to do all over again, what might you change as a young student? You know, we are not traveling now, but we will travel again sometime soon. But what might you do differently as we think about hosting and exchanging students?
I think that the good thing was that I actually stayed with several families during my year in Tupelo. I think that was actually, in hindsight, quite a good move by the Rotary Club, because at first I was a little bit disappointed when the Rotary Club told me that I was going to stay in one family for 2 months, then the next family, and so on. But actually, it turned out to be a very positive thing, because I got to experience several different families and their own family lives, and as we all know, we're all different. So that was very positive. But I didn't think it was going to be so positive beforehand. I think also Rotary was quite good in organizing meetings for the students. So we met other exchange students, which was also important to be able to discuss. Sometimes you feel lonely, you miss your family, you miss your own home country. And then sometimes it's good to be able to meet and share that experience with someone else. So I think on the whole, the experience was very good, and I don't really see that many things that could have been done differently that would have made a huge difference. I think also maybe just a final note that staying in a smaller town like Tupelo was probably quite good for me, one high school only. We had a girl actually from Memphis staying with our family. She stayed there with 3 families at my home in Helsingborg, Sweden. So she's in, I think it's just South Haven, southern parts of Memphis, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay,
Hello,
thanks.
Jonas. This is Jim.
Hi, Jim.
I was interested that this would be my first Zoom meeting, but certainly not my first meeting with you. I was going to let the other Rotarians know that Tom Bell, who is a Rotarian, and Joe Rutherford, my good friend, and I attended your wedding in Sweden. You remember?
You sure did. And that was great. And that was a few years ago in 1991.
Right. And one of the good things about that was that you and Cecilia were going to Disney World for your honeymoon and were at the time living in Brussels. And so Joe and I stayed in your apartment for a week while y'all were gone to on your honeymoon. And that was a nice free week in Europe.
Perfect. No, that's great that you're on the call, Jim. I mean, we've had so many good trips together, both in Europe and the States. So
right.
Wonderful.
I remember visiting with you in London with James Mason, and I remember eating with you and Cecilia in Paris, France, when you were living there. And I just can't count how many times I've been to Sweden to see you and Lars. And Lars was over here to visit me last fall. He and Irene came by and stopped and spent the night at my cabin at Pickwick. So you and Cecilia will have to follow up with that when the virus is gone.
Definitely, we will do that. Great to speak to you, Jim. Thanks.
Do we have any more questions for Jonas? Let me check the chat, Jonas, before we move forward. No, it looks like we're in good shape. So, well, thank you. That was a lot of fun, and as always, good to see you. And I think everyone on the call will know that Jonas was very popular when he was in Mississippi and has maintained relationships. We have 3 or 4 of his classmates on the call, his host mother, his host family, his host father, Jim, myself. And we see each other every 3-4 years. My wife actually was in Sweden last summer with Jonas and his wife. I was not there. So I think that's the beauty of Rotary and the beauty of this exchange program and relationships that we form through service clubs is they don't just last for a week, a day, a month, whatever. They last for years. And I consider Jonas one of my best and dearest friends. So thank you very much, Jonas. It's great to have you. A whole lot easier to have you via Zoom than to have you fly in and fly out for an hour conversation. So thank you very much.